thank you, and welcome to another episode of Talking Cloud. Now, this is where we talk about cloud, all things cloud, anything cloud, and come on, isn't anything computing related, cloud related? Just about, it seems like. And, I said so many times, I'm the Gilligan, I'm no professor, but I often get just some really, really amazingly smart people. Today is no exception. We got a great guest today, and I'm super excited. And I'm going to give true confessions on this one straight up. I had an outstanding recording with Todd, oh gosh, a week or two ago, and in the editing process, let's just say I cut my thumb off. I inadvertently deleted it. It was so. We have Todd back, but it's going to be a great one. So let me just run through and tell you a little bit about who Todd is, because the guy's, like so many of my guests, storied career. Going back to 98, he's Chief Information Officer and founder of Secure Logics, Chief Technology Officer and founder at Turillion. He can tell us yes or no on that. AIG, he's an Information Security Manager at, Lyondell Basel. Is that right? Is that how you say Lyondell Basel? Is that how you say that, Tom?
Lyondell Basel.
Lyondell Basel. Thank you for that proper infliction. Firefighter, president, property management, owner, lead private investigator. He's still doing that now, so watch out what feedback you give. You never know who will be finding you. President, Hunt Evil. He'll talk about that a little bit. We'll find out exactly what that is. Also, co-founder of Invisible. The guy's prolific. He's a board member at Conceal. That's currently, and also information security officer for, let's just say, a large oil and gas company, and we'll kind of leave it at that. I'm thrilled to have with me today Todd Beebe. Todd, what's going on, man? It's great to have you and see you again.
Yeah, it's been too long, a couple weeks. Well, happy to be back. Hopefully I can remember some of the stories that I told in the previous one, but we'll see how this goes.
No, since there's no proof of whatever it was, you can make up any new ones. It's totally fine. And with my memory, we're fine. It's like I won't hold you to anything.
Okay.
So look, I ran through what's clearly a pretty broad and interesting career, but I always like to kind of throw it back to my guest Todd and let him just talk a little bit about your journey, what you're doing, and we'll just push it from the dock that way.
Yeah, so it's kind of one of those journeys that eventually I took it as just let things play out. Almost all the things I originally planned, like I originally planned to go when I was in college to go into law enforcement, maybe become a federal judge or something. Next thing I know, I bought a computer, and that was the start of my computer career. And I didn't even take a computer class, not one computer class in college. I played around with like Texas Instruments, the TI-99s and stuff like that at home, but I didn't do anything that was going to be a career.
Yeah.
And firefighting, same thing. I was thinking about switching careers, going into medicine. For some reason, decided to then do some volunteer work and wanted to become a volunteer EMT before I became PA. That didn't turn out, so I became a volunteer firefighter and did that for 12 years. So hopefully that helps other people out there that, whatever journey you're on, it's probably going to have some turns you didn't expect, but don't be disappointed. You might be surprised and turn out even better than you could even imagine. Even my stint now in the 12 years in real estate, the first two attempts did not go well at all. And I actually, instead of selling the house and just saying, this is not for me, but I didn't officially close the door and kind of let things play out. And that's kind of what's all on my LinkedIn is kind of those different journeys along the way.
Yeah, I it's funny you say it, Todd, because I've told my kids, life, it's kind of like starting out at the top of a mountain and having a Super Bowl, one of those baseball sized Super Bowls, right? That bounces like nobody's business, right? And throwing it where you want it to go. And that first launch is usually in the direction you
Right.
desire. But the second it hits a surface, all bets are off. And the only thing you know for sure, metaphorically, of course, is it's going to go down. Time is going to continue, but it's not going to take the path that you charted in your mind when you tossed that ball, right? Just like you said.
Oh
But
yeah.
it is, there's a great poem, Desert Errata, that from I think like the late 60s, 70s. It was turned into a song. I think the guy's name is Les Crane, who sang it. But you are a child of the universe, no less than the trees and the stars. You have a right to be here, and whether or not it is clear to you, no doubt the universe is unfolding as it should. And it's I'm kind of, as I've lost my hair, I've kind of subscribed to that. You really don't get a chance other than you got to just believe that it's going to work out and
Right.
keep going down the mountain.
Yeah. And the more people probably interact with people who've been around for a while, they'll see that there's a positive, a positive turn, even though at times it feels like it's going down. It can bounce around, just like every river that in the
Yeah,
United States, they are not straight. You know what I
yeah,
mean? The rock redirects them. They find a softer spot in the rock, and they find their way back to the ocean.
yeah,
But that it's just don't spend a lot of time guaranteeing or trying to say this is the only path, because it will be like trying to cut through rock, and that
yeah.
takes a lot of time. But if you go with the path, like you sit on a boat that's going down the river, it's a much more comfortable if you're not trying to make it steer it to go one direction.
Right,
Um, so
right.
yeah, that's kind of the overall philosophy. But
So,
other than that,
I mean, you've been an information security officer. I mean, you've been in a like capacity for a long time, but clearly, right now, I'm seeing for nearly the last decade. Let's talk a little bit about how much it's changed in just that really short window of time from a landscape perspective, in your opinion.
well, and see, well, in my opinion, so so that goes in part of my background that I don't always talk about, but it seems to come up more. That I did have some, we'll call it a little bit of criminal activity early in my life, and I don't know if it helped me, but it's a certain mindset that very early in my career I was hired in, especially like my first, we'll call it major job, with Ernst and Young to build their attack and pen practice. They brought me down from Nebraska to Houston. Was thinking like an attacker. So having that mindset of, instead of thinking of like what is this technology and how does it get deployed, I was thinking how can I take advantage of that? How can that be a path to where I really need to end up? So
Yeah.
when I look at the landscape now, it's and I've been around long enough that I just see it, almost history repeat itself. So in the early 90s, when people were first getting connected to the internet, it was very similar to what I see now. Well, now we're getting a little bit more mature, but it was people just getting connectivity. Connectivity was the rule, right? And then eventually they realized that there was a lot of risk associated with that, and then they started putting web application firewalls and putting things in DMZs and trying to limit the access to prevent unexpected consequences with
Yep.
breaches.
Yep.
Well, then we all got comfortable with that, thinking, okay, we know this, we know the standards, we know the policies and procedures, and then the internet took a turn to where there was more availability of resources, like AWS or Azure, et cetera, that were out on the internet. So it's like,
Yep.
okay, let's go there, and we'll be able to spin up these environments much quicker, and deploy them much quicker. And then it's like, I'm just thinking there's going to be the same risk that was associated when the first time we will go connect, I don't know, Web 1.0, but connecting enterprise
Yep.
applications to the internet. So as a threat, I still see them as there's IP addresses, there's ports, there's processes, there's privilege. And those, a combination of those will be leveraged by a threat actor to gain access to something that they shouldn't gain access to. So to me, the underlying kind of that we'll call it foundation of the internet hasn't changed much. The applications, the availability, the feature sets, stuff like that has changed. But at the end of the day, what I got into, how I attacked organizations back in the day was if I can get access to them over the internet, like I could touch base with their IP, find an open port. I just needed one of two things: privilege or some kind of exploit or vulnerability that they hadn't yet patched or they were not aware of.
Yep.
So that
Open
same stuff,
window,
yeah,
open window, or somebody's badge.
right. I mean, when you think about it,
Metaphorically. Yeah.
like when you think about it metaphorically, when the when the pioneers were putting up properties, how many 1800s or whatever, there was
Yep.
doors, windows, and the stuff inside. And I don't care how new the skyscraper is, there's still, if you're thinking that same mindset is like, if I get past a door or a window, I get inside, then all of a sudden I'm trusted. Nobody,
Yep.
if I'm wearing the right badge.
Yep.
So while the technology that makes that building much better,
Yep.
still from a threat, it's still accessed this a similar way to the way the buildings were accessible and things
Yep.
on the internet were accessible.
Yep.
So but the kicker now is the technology then moves to another technology like Active Directory becomes Azure AD or whatever. And now the settings and stuff that you use in Active Directory don't translate. So now hardening them, trying to get visibility into how will you detect misuse becomes more of a challenge. So it looks
You're
new.
saying when you move from an on-prem AD
Right.
implementation up to some
Up to the cloud.
Didn't they just change the name, the Azure to Entra or
Right. Intra.
Entra AD or something? Yeah.
Right. But as a threat actor is like, I still just need to get some credentials
Yep.
or get
It's worse
access.
though, right? It's far worse insofar as it's a milkshake that anybody can stick their straw into. The cloud.
Yeah, well, that's what it was back in the mid '90s when everybody just had a web server sitting up and port 80 or then port 43 wasn't even a thing. So it was all unencrypted.
Yeah.
At least it was unencrypted. Most of it didn't even have username passwords. It was like,
Yep.
hey, we just trust everybody.
Well,
and then,
or you'd leave the port open for
right.
the guy who does your maintenance or whatever,
Right.
and you never even worried about it because, hey, who is ever going to worry about that, right?
Who's going to find it? And it's like they didn't realize that Nmap had been around and there's a way.
Well, they're scanning tools and ways certainly to hop all over and find you.
Right. So while the feature sets have changed to me from a threat view, it's still, I still have to get educated a little bit on the nuances of the different applications, but the method, when I look at the new, somebody on LinkedIn might post, hey, here's my red team, how to, that I could almost map that back to the how to I used in the mid '90s and late '90s and everything else. The basics are there. The applications might be a little bit different, but that, the risk and the path that the attackers follow is tried and true.
The difference too, Todd, it's the fact that the level of interconnectedness that we're in today, in today's world, really is unlike it's obviously greater than it's ever been, and it's only going up, right? It's only increasing as more and more. Everything gets digitized. Everything becomes digital as it's getting pushed out. Call it OT, IoT, call it whatever you want. I see it as like, it's just more gears connected that spin when other gears spin in this massive universe called the internet. And yeah, sure, we're doing all we can. It's almost like we're doing it backwards, it seems, Todd, where to start, and I think it was driven because of the technological capabilities, right? I talk about this all the time. I mean, the only use case to securely use this thing called the internet was a firewall or a VPN, but the bandwidth was so slow. You had to have a network inside with a pop and I mean, it was far different than what it is today,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But the design, had we only had the forethought, and let me ask you this: we've all heard of Moore's law, right?
Right.
Or right from
Exponential.
the exponential increase, and
Right.
it varied from originally, I think it was 2 years to got down to like a year or whatever. But we all agree it's fast and it's moving up. And by all accounts, from the data I was looking at, maybe not the same criteria is influencing the increases, but the increases are still occurring at the same rate. It's still happening, and there's no end in sight. And so here's my question. That law, right, was from the guy from Intel, and it was in the late 70s or I think early 80s that he threw it out there when he first, okay. The internet was yet another decade away. And so I've often pondered, why didn't someone extrapolate in their mind where we're going to be in 10 years, in 20 years, and then try to back into the architectural design? Okay, maybe it would have been too painfully slow, but it seems like what we're now trying to do is fix the plane while it's flying, to go back to zero trust and least privilege and microsegmentation and all these things that, had you done in the beginning on the front end, it would have sure made life easier. I don't know. What do you think? And I guess I bring it up only because Moore's law had already been in place for a decade. We knew it was true. It was happening. No one could doubt it.
I think it's, to me, it's what explains it is the same thing that explains when people talk about the cat and mouse game, is until something is there and it's in use, even the threat actor can't figure out a way to now take advantage of it. And think about it with vehicles. People didn't foresee that a driverless car might actually drive underneath a semi, because they didn't foresee what are all the different ways this can be used other than what was expected. Right. And that's what threat actors take advantage of, is the programmer is not thinking like a threat actor, and they didn't put in a check to make sure, hey, if the buffer is this long, it will overwrite memory. And so security always, I shouldn't say always, but security always will come after something's deployed and in production, and then somebody finds a way who's trying to get access to whatever it is, of finding, okay, what did they not think of ahead of time?
Right.
I don't, and I think that's just, and especially when you get into business, where businesses, the reason we're deploying it is because we have a business need, trying to say, okay, we're going to sit on it for 2 years while the red team figures out ways to get into it. It's like, well, I can't even figure out ways to get into it because the normal people haven't figured out a path that now I can take advantage of. It's how banks were, when I think of bank robberies, or think of anything where there was something else, whether it be electronic bank robberies, they're looking at how is it normally being used, just like fishes. What do I need to put in the email to make it look normal? And then I can take advantage of, they let their guard down, because that's what threat actors take advantage of, both cyber and in physical situations, of what's the norm, and then how can I look like the norm but gain the advantage I want. So, pen tester noticed they always let in people that are carrying bags into the door. Okay, this is a friendly environment. Now, since I don't have a badge, I'll do that same thing. And I've already seen that it works. with legitimate people, but they don't know I'm not because they never check to see if there's a badge hanging on my waist, right? So I don't know if we can foresee it, and I don't know if business would see the value of nobody's even attacked it, and now you guys want us to sit on it for 6 months. You can find all the vulnerabilities in the code that we couldn't have foresaw somebody would try to do a buffer overflow on or whatever, right?
Yeah, it's certainly, it seems like, you know, some of the most difficult aspects of securing is trying to be on the other end of the rope, so to speak, right? On the other end of the journey, and
Well,
to
we'll see in
come
the
back.
future. It's
Yeah,
essentially you would have to see in the future.
yeah.
The thing I think that gives me hope with me is future. History tends to repeat itself.
Right.
So when I look, because I've been in security my whole career, it's like, hold on, this looks very, very familiar. So when somebody's trying to deploy something, I'm like I can literally sit in a meeting. I remember the last company I was at, to be sitting in the meeting, they'd be talking about deploying some new technology and the DMZ, blah blah blah, and I'm like, whoa, what did you just say? And then they would say it back to me. I'm like, hold on, that's something like almost like deja vu. That's something that I could take advantage of, or somebody could take advantage of to gain unauthorized access.
Right. And
but again, it kind of takes that, the leveraging the history of what it is to kind of foresee this is similar. It might be a little bit different because, okay, now this is in intra AD versus whatever, but hey, is there now we can ask the right questions. Is there a way to do this where, to gain this permission in intra ID where you used to be able to gain an Active Directory, and now we can know, okay, the threat actor is going to probably looking for some accounts with that privilege. So let's at least learn, because it will have some similarities. Again, I think history tends to repeat itself, and I think that's what will help secure things in the future. But I don't know if we'll be able to, make it bug proof or anything like that, because if they're building in new features and new use cases, nobody even thought of putting in airbags when they were making cars that were going 10 miles an hour because they didn't need them. Right. And then they didn't even foresee that somebody's going to be driving 160 down the Autobahn and a deer will run out in front of them. And how do we try to keep them alive? Right.
I remember, I think it was, I want to say 80s.
I was alive.
I was
just barely.
But I remember in Microsoft Word,
yes,
there was an Easter egg where, if you held down all the right keys and press them at the same time, and it was something that no QA team would ever test. Right. Because there would never be a reason to test it ever. But when you did it, up came this banner that said something nasty about Bill Gates, or something, right? And it was planted there, obviously, by the developers. But I think, what that really showed me was how incredibly difficult it is to QA, especially when you start getting into the world we're in today, where it's a cloud-based SaaS. It's part of your supply chain.
Right.
I mean, it's part of your supplier's supply chain. I mean, that to me just, I feel like really, really creates all the, it just simply exacerbates the complexity, which it makes it much, much more challenging. But I think to your point, if I get your credentials, right? Because that's like the number one way. Yes. But what's different is where before, if I got your credentials and I was in your network, it wouldn't be the same as if I got into your cloud or into something where you've propagated a cloud presence. And then you start, the ability to move laterally is just so much greater today than it's ever been.
Yes. Because that's the ultimate goal of the threat actor. When I was a threat actor, it was, I'm trying to get something where I can get to anything or get to things of value.
Yeah.
It's almost, hardly ever is the initial access on the system was the destination, right?
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
walking into a building. The destination is never the first floor, right? The
Let me
destination
ask,
of the threat.
and so how much do you think we got a couple of factors, big rocks? I'm just
Right.
curious what you think. COVID, obviously, and really not so much COVID, but the impact of COVID and the mandate for so many to work from home, where still that long tail is, there's a lot still working remotely, right? And in doing that, now all of a sudden we've got corporate users where maybe they were never working from home or rarely now or frequently working from home. How much do you think that that's opened up more risk for enterprise with that higher percentage of overall computing interaction happening, at home in an uncontrolled area?
I think where it impacts is companies that um, what I see is that it will impact a company that is already like the reason they didn't deploy remote access for the current employee base is probably because of either budget, of time, of just technical resources,
Mm-hmm.
and so if they then had to deploy that because they had no other choice because their employees are now remote,
Right.
um, that it's most likely the budget was impacted. They probably went, okay, let's just get the basic in here, and we're not
Right.
even working about multi-factor. So it kind of made to me a significant separation between the haves and the have-nots. Because when I look at it,
Interesting.
because to me, security, just like what we talked about earlier, it's speed to market. So budget and time are the two things that are outside of security.
Yep.
And so if you have unlimited budget and unlimited time, you probably won't have too many vulnerabilities in your code because you will have the time and the
Yep.
team to
Don't know
to
any
ferret those
companies that
out.
have those.
That's
Those
it. That,
yeah.
yeah,
I mean, nobody
right.
has
That's what I meant.
unlimited budget on. Yeah, exactly.
And what's hard, what's even more difficult is just the mental trick that humans play on themselves of, hey, if I don't see it for a while, it's almost like it doesn't exist as a threat.
Sure.
And,
Totally.
and it's like, hey, we've been spending all this money and all this time to wait 2 years before we deploy anything. We've never had an attack. I don't
Yeah.
even think we really need it that bad. And they ratchet down, and then attack comes and like, oops, I think we went too far on the other end. But you
Yeah.
don't really know, like, how fast can I drive without a seatbelt until there's something negative that occurs.
Sure.
Otherwise, they just keep pushing down the gas pedal and saying, we don't need your airbags. Look at this. We're
Totally.
cruising along. And it's like, but
Yeah.
there's no traffic, you're doing it in
Yep.
the middle of the day,
That's
doing it in the middle of the night.
that
So
is the ultimate challenge
yes.
for the CISO to communicate to his or her organization, if the organization has a CISO. Which I say that because I think sometimes we underestimate or overestimate how many companies really have a CISO, as opposed to how many companies, like we're talking, are so interconnected, have all the same risks, but just don't have their, they just are not able to rise to address, from a scalability perspective, the complexity and challenges of security. I think there's a real gap. It's the haves and have nots, as you put it.
Oh
I
yeah.
think that, there's enterprises that can hang with it. And then there's a lot of the small business, small enterprise that I think really just, you know, pray every day that they don't get their doorknob rattled, and get caught,
Well,
because I think it's and it's only increasing for them. I mean, I worry about my wife's retail business.